Hi, we're here at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver, and I'm joined by Quinn, who is leading up a fairly new company, still out the gate, only a few months ago, called Osprey Gold. So with other companies, I've been getting updates, but Osprey's so new. Can you just paint us the picture of what are these assets that you've picked up in Nova Scotia?
For sure, Gwen. So we started, we kind of rolled this whole thing out in January there, and what we've acquired is a package of 4 historically producing assets in Nova Scotia, all within about kind of 60K of each other or so. So we have one kind of main cornerstone asset with a resource on it now, and then 3 earlier stage ones. Goldenville, which is kind of our primary asset, which is the one with the resource there, we announced a month and a bit ago. About 447,000 ounces at 5 grams. There's 2 components to that resource. There's a near surface component at a lower grade, and then there's a higher grade underground component. And then we'll be advancing that asset through this summer's exploration programs, as well as taking a look at kind of my background and my forte is really earlier stage exploration. So these other 3 assets that we have in the province.
Right. Okay. So Goldenville, I mean, that's a pretty great starting asset, right? Like you got 500,000 ounces and it's at 5 grams. Can you describe a little bit how that's laid out? I know there was a historic mine there. So how it's laid out, and then what upside do you see? I know that to the west in particular, there's sort of an unexplored trend. Yeah,
that's correct. So Goldenville was Nova Scotia's largest historic producer. It produced from about 1862 to 1942, when the most of the production in the province kind of stopped during World War II. So since then, it's been kind of explored intermittently. It's a large east-west trending anticline. Most of these Maguma-type deposits that you'll see elsewhere in the province are on these anticlines within the Maguma Formation, and specifically within the Goldenville Formation, named after the Goldenville deposit. So at Goldenville, when production stopped, it covered a few hundred meters kind of east-west, and then the anticline itself dips off to the west underneath some glacial till and cover. So it's been kind of underexplored in that region until about 3.5 kilometers off to the west. There's 2 drill holes from 1997 with it's about 20 meters of about 3 grams relatively near surface. So some pretty interesting results in the scope and context of what Atlantic is looking at with their pits, their grades, their kind of deposit geometry. So very excited about kind of the potential between those 2 deposits to work Goldenville off to the west and then at Mitchell Lake itself.
Right. Okay. So lots of work, lots of opportunities. Specifically this summer, some geophysics, some sampling, some drilling.
Yeah. Nova Scotia is an area that's kind of seen not a ton of what we would maybe consider relatively modern exploration. The last kind of really big program at Goldenville was in the late 1980s, and then there's been some work done in the early 2000s and stuff, but smaller programs. So we'll go in, some geophysics, surface work to try to see if we can see anything through that till cover, and then work with our drills on the project itself and try to expand that resource and upgrade some of those resources if we can.
Right. Okay, so then my last 2 questions. One, you do have these other assets, and I know Nova Scotia has this history of gold mines. There's a lot of them throughout the province, but the attention shifted away from the province, 50 years ago. So you see other opportunity, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, realistically, the other 3 projects we have are all, from a very high level, roughly similar. They're high-grade historic producers of anywhere from kind of 5 to 15,000 ounces, which these deposits are really all over the region. And when we look at the scale of Nova Scotia, a district in Nova Scotia is a prospect in another part of the world, whereas you look at projects in other parts of the world where their whole project is 50 kilometers from end to end. For us, that's, a large part of the province is 50 kilometers end to end. So they're all within the same district. There's this large metals endowment in the province, and these little mines exist all over the place. So certainly looking at some of these other opportunities in the area and what we can do on those is on our radar screen.
For sure. Okay. And then the last question, you're working in Atlantic Canada, the east coast of the country. A few years ago, nobody really thought about gold in Atlantic Canada. That's changed a lot. So Atlantic Gold, a company that you mentioned, they're building a gold mine. that's looking into a similar thing that you mentioned. So they these high grade veins that everyone used to mine, they're looking at the mineralization that surrounds those veins and so that's a different approach to mining. I know that you're investigating that potential, but really there's just a huge amount of new interest coming into Atlantic Canada.
Correct. And, I colloquially like to say that, the best place in the world to find gold is where there's gold. And so we know that there's a large amount of gold in Nova Scotia. So taking a look at 1 gram material, which if you were an underground miner in 1928, didn't really mean a lot to you. Mm-hmm. The historic production grades for Goldenville are about 12 grams. But so if we can incorporate some 1-2 gram Walmarock material in, suddenly it's an open pit. It's a whole different game, which is what Atlantic has really shown and kind of really started reinvigorating the region.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with it. I certainly like the story. The share structure's tight. The company's got money. The assets are interesting. And it's a young, dynamic team. So thanks for coming to the conference and best of luck.
Well, thanks, Ben. And we'll talk to you soon.